Looking at everything you do in your garden from your plant's perspectives is the absolute biggest secret held in common by every great and highly successful gardener, and was so obviously and glaringly absent from every gardener who struggles. And the more a gardener embraces this perspective, the better they are. So if you have the passion to grow fruits and vegetables but have always struggled, or have always wanted to but have felt overwhelmed by the challenge, or even if you've been gardening for a long time but want to become better at it, start thinking about everything you do in terms of what your plants most need. And your garden will explode in growth, health, and production. And luckily for garden plants, seeing it from their perspective is actually really easy. Judd Lefebvre here with Green Thumb Gardening Secrets, where we're trying to reforge the generational chain of knowledge that connects people to their food and all the other wonderful joys of gardening. Let's give this a little context. All plants everywhere in the world need four things. They need a certain soil type, certain amount of sunlight, certain amount of soil moisture, and the correct growing temperatures. That's it. And each plant thrives in a different combination of those four. From super nutrient deficient soils like peatland soils to the super rich soil you'd find under a tall grass prairie with maybe like 4+ feet of topsoil. From direct sunlight all day like you'd find in an open prairie, or the dense shade of a rainforest understory. From the dry soil of a desert to actually growing in water. From the cold of the tundra to the steady warmth of the equator, and everything in between. So a certain soil type, amount of direct sunlight, soil moisture, and temperature range. And this simplifies things. If plants get what they need in each, they're healthy. If they get their ideal in each of those, they're outstanding. They'll be at their absolute peak of health and productivity. It's that simple. And to make it even easier for garden plants, although they each differ a little bit, none of them have extreme differences like desert conditions for soil moisture or deep shade of a rainforest understory, which makes it just much easier to create an environment that hits their general range and have great success. And then as you gain more experience years later, maybe make a few minor adjustments to create a bit of a microclimate for each and have even greater success. And I'll have more on that microclimate stuff on some videos a bit later. So for vegetable garden plants, the line that you're trying to hit is super rich soil compared to other plants, immense amounts of sunlight compared to other plants, likely vastly more than just about any ornamental plant you have in your landscaping, moderate soil moisture, and a temperature range between 40 and 90 degrees. So like 5 to 32 degrees Celsius. And sure, there's a little bit more detail and nuance in each of those four. Like their cool season plants can take it even cooler, some even below freezing, and warm season plants, some of them would be 100 degrees or high 30s Celsius, and they'd be totally fine. And that nuance eventually becomes a fun part instead of the overwhelming part, and we'll get into all of that. But if you always start with it, come back to those four most powerful needs of your plants, they'll burst forth in health and growth, and they'll be incredibly productive. And if your plants get all four reasonably well, not even to the utmost, they'll be so healthy and productive, you won't even need to dump a bunch of chemicals on them to protect them from diseases and pests, because they'll grow so quickly and they'll have so many of their own defenses that the little bit of extra help they get from arachnids and insects that are already in your garden is enough to keep them not just surviving, but thriving. And if your plants get all four to the utmost, they'll be at their absolute peak of health, growth, and productivity. Plus, since these four form the core of what plants really need, if there's ever a problem, it's so much easier to problem solve. Like a mechanic diagnoses a motor that won't run by knowing it needs fuel, air, compression, or spark to work, so they can just go through each of those four like a checklist to see what's just not getting and solve it. Or a parent figures out what's wrong with their child by knowing it's either lack of sleep, lack of proper nutrition, running around that hazmat zone we call a daycare, or some combination of those four. If there's ever a problem, you can just go back through those four reasons of what plants really need, figure out the root cause, and solve it. So it makes a lot of sense to teach gardening as a focus on the four things plants really need. And then we'll teach most of the 1,000 other tasks of gardening as just part of them. And this has several benefits. One, it's an easy way to start. It's easy to understand, it's easy to do. And since these four have by far the biggest impact on your plant's growth and health, it's easy to have great success right away by addressing them. Plus, they provide a really good framework to understand all of the smaller steps that become part of it later on. So it's not 1,000 separate ideas and steps you need to hold in your head at one time. Those pieces that are overwhelming for most gardeners, they'll fit just in as part of those four. And even better, once you really understand and appreciate how those four work, you'll find yourself problem solving on your own all the time just because you know what your plants really need. Any problem that they're facing, the solution will become obvious to you. And finally, because of the core of what plants really need, starting with them not only as a framework for understanding your garden, but also as a foundation for all of your garden decisions. Make sure that each of those 1,000 steps that you're going to do, one, makes sense to you, and two, is built on giving your plants what they really need for maximum growth and health. So you're ensuring that everything you do makes your plant strong, healthy, and productive, because you're starting with what their needs are in everything that you do. So in these videos, we'll start there and look at first at why our garden plants need such amazingly rich soil and so much sunlight compared to other plants, so you really understand it. Then we'll give a multitude of methods for how to achieve each of those, from easiest pie to the most involved and impactful you can imagine. And then we'll do the same thing with moisture and growing temperature. And as we go along, we'll be fitting what once were the 1,000 tasks and all the nuances of gardening that were often overwhelming to newcomers simply into ways to meet these 4 main needs of your plants. Sure, we might add a few other tips here and there, but most will fit into the core 4. And then we'll add 2 others, companion planting and garden spacing and layout, that are also very impactful, but not absolutely critical. And focusing on these will make you much more successful, whether you're a longtime veteran gardener or an absolute noob. So if you've wanted to get started but haven't because you just felt it's too complicated, or if you've become frustrated with gardening but the passion for it still burns in your soul, or if you've given up on gardening because you found it overwhelming and thinking you just had a brown thumb, but you still long to do it, you can do it. Everyone can. It's not that hard. I'll show you it can actually even be easy. And even if you've been doing it for 30 years and have been successful, this focus will make you so much better. You'll be the gardener you always wanted to be, and be prepared to always stay open to growing. You can find more on this topic and others on my website. I'll leave a link in the description below. Like this video if you liked it. Likes really help us out. Leave a question or comment below. I personally answer each one, and subscribe to get all of our future videos. And if social media is your jam, feel free to follow us on Twitter and Instagram for more Green Thumb gardening secrets, tips, and tricks. Just the tips.